Welcome back to my channel. I'm glad you're here. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back to my channel. I hope we all are doing well. Today we'll be talking about something that many of us struggle with, but rarely talk about, and that is people pleasing. When I talk about people pleasing, I mean the constant need to be liked, to be agreeable, to keep the peace, even when it costs you yours. I'm going to take a scripture from Galatians 1:10, which says, "For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." Galatians 1:10. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever said yes when everything inside you was screaming no? Have you ever gone out of your way for someone, not because you wanted to, but because you were afraid of disappointing them? If that sounds like you, then stick with me, because people pleasing may seem harmless, even noble at times, but it's quietly draining your peace. It's distracting you from your purpose and affecting your mental and even your physical health. What people pleasing really is. People pleasing is not kindness. It's fear dressed up in polite behavior. It's the fear of being rejected. It's a fear of being seen as difficult. It's a fear of not being enough unless you're constantly giving, you're doing, or serving others. And let's be honest, it often starts early. Maybe you were taught to be the good girl, or you kept quiet so others wouldn't get upset. Maybe you were praised more when you were helpful and quiet than when you spoke your truth. So it became a pattern, a survival tactic. But now it has become your identity, and it's time to break free. Now, what is it costing you? Let's talk about the real cost of people pleasing, because it's not just emotional, it's spiritual and physical too. Now, let's look at mentally. It always makes you feel so exhausted. You replay conversations, you overthink every text, you feel guilty for resting or saying no. Saying no, which is the biggest thing that most of us are struggling with, and it's affecting our mental health. And now let's look at physically. How is people's pleasing affecting you physically? The stress, it shows up in your body. Constant headaches, fatigue, anxiety, even illness from carrying emotional burden that we are never used to carry. Spiritually, it's even more dangerous, my friends. You're following the expectations of people instead of the purpose God has placed in you. You can dive into the scripture which I read previously, Galatians 1:10. Because that scripture actually is trying to tell us not to seek the approval of men, the approval of human beings, rather than we are to only seek the approval of God. Because if we're trying to always please people, then we are not truly a servant of Christ. You cannot fulfill your calling and everyone's expectations at the same time. Now, let's look at what God says about your worth. Because most times, most people that struggle with people pleasing, sometimes they kind of doubt their worth. So now let me remind you of what God says about your worth. God didn't create you to be a doormat wherein everyone steps on you. He didn't create you to shrink, to keep others comfortable, which most of us are guilty of. He called you to walk boldly, confidently, and freely. Psalm 139 verse 14 says, "I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made." That's how you were made, fearfully and wonderfully. You were not made fearfully and agreeable made, not fearfully and perfectly polite, but you were wonderfully made. That means you're allowed to take up spaces. You're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to rest. And guess what? You're still loved, even when someone is disappointed in you. Now let's talk about some signs that shows you may be a people's pleaser. These are just few points that I highlighted, and one of them says you say yes when you want to say no. You constantly feel responsible for other people's emotions. I have been there. I'm saying this out of experience. It's something that I've experienced. It's draining. It is so draining. You feel guilty when you set a boundary. You avoid conflict at all costs. That has been me. Most times I try to avoid conflict at all costs because I feel like, oh, I don't want to hurt this other person. You try to avoid it all the times. You feel like your worth depends on what you do for others. Yes, some of us go out of our way to do things for others because sometimes we feel that is the only way people can acknowledge us. If this sounds familiar, it's time to heal. Let's heal together. And the good news is we can. You can. I can. Now let's look at ways to break free from this people pleasing thing. I'm going to give you a faith-based steps, to help us break free from the people's pleasing thing, which has destroyed us, which is still destroying us. And if we don't take actions now, it's going to continue to destroy us. And we don't want to live our lives like that. Number one, I'll say start with praying. Ask God to show you where you've been living for approval instead of alignment. Number two, practice saying no, which is one of the biggest things that a lot of us struggle with. You don't have to explain. No is a full sentence. Let your no be your no. You only explain if you choose to, but don't explain because you want to please this person. Number three is creating boundaries that honor your peace. Even Jesus himself had boundaries. He walked away from crowds. He rested. So we too can. Unlearn guilt. Number four, unlearning guilt. Feeling bad doesn't mean you were doing something wrong. It means you're doing something different. Remember who you are, which is number five. You are a child of God, not a slave to expectations. You don't have to keep living for their approval. God already approved you before you earned a single compliment. So breathe, rest, and walk in your freedom. If this message speaks to you, please comment below. Tell me your biggest takeaway. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. You were created to be you were not created to be everyone's answer. You were created to walk in your purpose. Until next time, keep rising, keep healing, keep shining, walk in greatness. Remember, you're a child of God. You're not a slave to expectations. Remember to say no when you have to. Remember to set your boundaries. Remember to protect your peace at all costs. Thank you. And until next time, God bless.